My daughter brought home the man I betrayed my family for, and my husband noticed. Subscribe now, because some secrets refuse to stay buried. The dinner table was set, candles flickering softly, casting a warm glow over our perfect family dinner. Emma was radiant, her eyes sparkling as she clung to Omari's arm. "Mom, Dad, this is Omari," she beamed, squeezing his hand. "The love of my life." The words sent a chill through me. My fingers trembled slightly as I reached for my wine glass, masking the unease twisting my stomach. I dared to glance at him, Omari, his deep, knowing eyes locking with mine for the briefest second. It was fleeting, but the weight of our shared past settled heavily between us. Charles, my husband, offered a polite yet measured nod. He studied Omari carefully, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. Was it suspicion? Or was I just paranoid? I forced a smile. "It's lovely to meet you, Omari." The lie sat bitter on my tongue. As the night unfolded, Emma's laughter filled the air, her excitement spilling over as she talked about their future. "We've been together for a year now, and I just know he's the one," she said, her face glowing with happiness. I watched her, my beautiful, innocent daughter, so blissfully unaware of the silent war raging inside me. Omari sat beside her, his arm draped casually over her chair. My mind flickered back to a time when that arm had been wrapped around me, whispering sweet nothings, igniting desires I had no right to feel. A memory hit me, his lips tracing my skin, stolen moments in dimly lit rooms, promises that were never meant to be kept. I excused myself, stepping into the cold night air, my breath uneven. "Do you ever think about us?" The voice behind me sent shivers down my spine. I turned, finding Omari standing there, too close, too familiar. His gaze held mine, unreadable yet burning with something unresolved. I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering in my ears. "We can't do this," I whispered, but even I didn't believe my own words. Later that night, I watched Emma giggle on the phone, her voice dripping with love, for him. My heart clenched. The illusion of my perfect family had begun to crack. Avoiding Omari should have been easy. I was his fiancé's mother, after all. And yet, he had a way of making himself unavoidable. At family dinners, his fingers would brush mine when passing a dish. At gatherings, his gaze would linger a moment too long. When Charles walked into the room, Omari would straighten, flashing his perfect smile like nothing had happened. But something was happening. One afternoon, I went to his flat, determined to end this madness for good. "We have to stop," I told him, my voice barely above a whisper. "This is dangerous." Omari leaned against the doorframe, that same smirk playing on his lips. "You don't really want to stop, Sarah." I turned away, ashamed of the heat rising to my face. "I love my family." He stepped closer, his voice low, teasing. "Then why are you here?" Before I could answer, a knock on the door shattered the moment. "Omari?" "It's me." Emma's voice. My heart stopped. He looked at me, his eyes widening with realization. I spun around, frantically searching for a way out. The flat was small, there was nowhere to hide. Omari cracked the door open just enough to slip outside. "Hey, babe," he greeted her smoothly. What a surprise. I held my breath as Emma stepped inside. My only way out was through the kitchen, just past where they were standing. I waited until they were distracted, their voices mingling in laughter, and then I darted out. I didn't stop running until I was back in my car. My hands gripped the wheel, shaking. That was too close. Meanwhile, Charles was growing suspicious. "Something's off about that boy," he muttered to his best friend over a drink that evening. His friend raised an eyebrow. "Omari?" Charles nodded. "He acts different around Sarah." "It's subtle, but I can feel it." His friend sighed. "Watch closely, mate. Sometimes, it's the ones closest to us who betray us." That night, Omari cornered me again. This time, at a charity event. I tried to walk away, but he grabbed my wrist, his touch igniting something I hated to admit was still there. "You still want me," he murmured. "Admit it." I yanked my hand away, my breath unsteady. "Leave me alone, Omari." I knew he wouldn't. Emma noticed my unease but dismissed it as menopause stress. "Mum, you're acting weird," she laughed. "Is it the hot flashes?" I forced a smile. Something like that. That night, I finally allowed myself to breathe. Maybe I could keep this buried. Maybe I could move on. Then my phone buzzed. A message. From him. I miss the way you tremble when I touch you. My blood turned to ice. A few feet away, Charles shifted in bed. His eyes were open. He had seen the message. The moment Charles turned to me, phone in hand, I knew I was caught. Who is this from, Sarah? His voice was eerily calm, but his grip on the phone was tight, knuckles white. I swallowed, forcing an exasperated sigh. It's just a message, Charles. Don't make a scene over nothing. Nothing? His eyes burned into mine. A man is texting my wife about how she trembles when he touches her, and you expect me to believe it's nothing? I scoffed, shaking my head. You're being paranoid. The tension hung thick between us, but I refused to break. Charles exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair before turning away. I had managed to deflect, but for how long? Meanwhile, Emma was planning something special. She had noticed Omari's growing distance. He was distracted, barely looking at her when they talked. She convinced herself it was just stress, that he needed a reminder of their love. A weekend getaway, she beamed, showing him the itinerary she had planned. Just us, no distractions. Omari hesitated before plastering on a fake smile. Sounds perfect, babe. But the moment she left, he reached for his phone. Meet me tonight. And like a fool, I went. We met at our usual secluded spot, away from prying eyes. I told myself this was the last time. I told myself I would end it once and for all. But then Omari touched my face, and my resolve crumbled. Do you ever think about leaving all this behind? He murmured. I closed my eyes, breathing him in. Omari, please. The flash of a camera cut through the darkness. We spun around, panic surging through us. A figure stood just a few feet away. Emma's best friend. Her expression was unreadable as she stared at us, phone clutched in her hand. And then, without a word, she turned and walked away. It didn't take long for the storm to hit. Emma's phone buzzed later that night. An anonymous message. Your mother and your fiancé are hiding something. Check your phone for proof. She frowned, heart pounding as she clicked the attachment. The image loaded slowly. Her breath hitched. Sarah. Omari. Locked in an intimate embrace. The world around her crumbled. The confrontation was inevitable. Emma burst into the living room, eyes wild, holding up her phone. What the hell is this? I froze. Emma, please, don't you dare lie to me, Mum, she screamed. Tears streamed down her face. I trusted you. I loved you. How could you do this to me? My lips parted, but no words came out. There was no excuse, no justification that could make this right. Emma turned to Omari, voice trembling. And you? You swore you loved me. He opened his mouth, but Emma shook her head. Don't. I don't want to hear another damn lie from you. She turned back to me, eyes filled with raw betrayal. You were supposed to protect me, not destroy me. And then, she was gone. Storming out of the house. Slamming the door behind her. And in the silence that followed, I turned and saw Charles standing in the doorway. His face was dark. Emotionless. He had seen everything. The house had never been this quiet. Charles stood by the window, his back to me, his shoulders rigid. He hadn't spoken a word since Emma left. Hours had passed, but he remained there, unmoving, staring into the darkness outside. And then, without turning around, he spoke. How long have you been lying to me? The words were calm. Deceptively calm. But I could hear the weight of them, the restrained fury, the unbearable hurt. Tears welled in my eyes. Charles, please, answer me, Sarah. I swallowed hard. It was a mistake. My voice was barely above a whisper. I never meant for any of this to happen. Charles finally turned. His eyes, usually so kind, were now filled with something else entirely. Disgust. Disbelief. A mistake? He let out a bitter laugh. A mistake is burning dinner. Forgetting an anniversary. Not this. He took a slow step forward. You destroyed this family, Sarah. I crumbled, sobs shaking my body. I love you, Charles. I love our family. I lost myself. Save it. His voice was flat. You didn't lose yourself, Sarah. You chose this. Every word was a knife to my chest. Meanwhile, Emma was breaking apart in her own way. She curled up on the couch at her friend's house, hugging her knees to her chest. She hadn't eaten, hadn't spoken much. I don't know how to move on from this, she whispered, her voice hollow. My own mother. The man I was going to marry. How do you even begin to recover from something like this? Her friend reached for her hand. You don't have to figure it out right now, Em. Just breathe. One moment at a time. But Emma didn't know how to breathe when everything around her had collapsed. Omari, on the other hand, was trying to control the damage. He called Emma. Texted. Left voicemails. Emma, I swear, I never meant to hurt you. Your mother, she came on to me. I was weak. I made a mistake, but I love you. But Emma ignored every call. Every message. Omari wasn't done yet. He showed up at her friend's house, banging on the door. Emma, just talk to me. Her friend stepped outside, blocking his way. Leave. Just let me explain. She doesn't want to hear it. The door slammed in his face. Omari stood there, breathing heavily, his jaw clenched. He refused to be painted as the villain in this. Charles wasn't about to let him off easy either. The next day, Charles found him. Pulled him aside, away from prying eyes. You listen to me, and you listen carefully, Charles said, his voice dangerously low. You regret this now? Just wait. Because you will never forget the day you walked into my house and ruined my family. Omari swallowed, shifting uncomfortably. Look, man, Charles stepped closer. You're done here. Stay the hell away from Emma. Stay the hell away from my wife. His voice dropped to a whisper, his eyes cold and unwavering. Or I promise you, you'll regret it in ways you can't even imagine. Omari held his gaze for a moment, then looked away. He knew a threat when he heard one. Back home, I watched in silence as Charles packed his bags. Shirt after shirt. Tie after tie. Charles, please don't do this, I begged, my voice breaking. We can fix this. I will do whatever it takes. He zipped up his suitcase, not meeting my eyes. No, Sarah. You did this. He grabbed his bag and walked past me without another word. And just like that, my family was slipping away. The house felt colder than before. Emma stepped inside, setting her bag down without a word. Sarah rushed forward, hopeful, desperate. But Emma walked past her as if she were nothing more than a ghost. Emma, please. Sarah pleaded, her voice breaking. I made a terrible mistake, but I love you. You're my daughter. Emma finally turned, her expression unreadable. Are you? She asked softly, then exhaled sharply. Because a mother wouldn't do what you did. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I regret it every single day. Emma's lips curled bitterly. Some betrayals can't be undone. Her voice was cold, distant. And some people can't be forgiven. Sarah's knees almost buckled. Meanwhile, Charles had made his decision. The crisp shuffle of papers filled the silent living room. Sarah stared at the document in disbelief. Divorce, she whispered. Charles nodded. I can't fix this, Sarah. And I won't pretend anymore. His voice was firm but devoid of anger. It was worse. It was final. Please, Charles, she begged. I love you. I love our family. He met her gaze for a long moment. Then you shouldn't have destroyed it. And with that, he walked away, leaving her holding the weight of her choices. Omari, now abandoned by both women, made one last attempt to salvage what was left. He found Emma outside her office, waiting by her car. Emma, please. Just listen to me. She folded her arms, expression blank. You have 60 seconds. I made a mistake, he admitted, his voice raw. But I love you. I still want us, Emma shook her head. No. You don't love me. You never did. That's not true. She took a step forward, her voice unwavering. You were never the man I thought you were. A pause. Then, with quiet finality, she added, and I was never the fool you thought I was. She turned and walked away, leaving Omari standing there, his world crumbling around him. Final scene, Sarah sat alone in the empty house, staring at old family pictures. Laughter frozen in time. Smiles that no longer existed. A voiceover played softly. Sometimes, in chasing passion, we lose what truly matters. Betrayal leaves scars that never heal. The screen faded to black. Subscribe for more bold confessions.